Welcome to Raytown Chop Shop, and this is part 12 of the KawaBunga build.
We're not getting any prettier, but the KawaBunga is. The last thing we had to do before slapping a coat of paint on the KawaBunga was to install a floor. We picked up some 18-gauge sheet metal from Metal by the Foot when we first started the project. We flipped the go-kart frame upside down and laid the sheet metal across the bottom to get our measurements. Once we decided on the length, Austin sliced off the extra material with a cutting disc. With the length cut to size, it was time to figure out the width. I opted for the jigsaw instead of the cutting wheel and trimmed the sheet metal down to size.
With the sheet metal in place, I welded the floor to the bottom of the frame. Dad pressed the sheet metal against the frame with a screwdriver to make sure we had good contact. I ran a spot weld about 1 inch long every 6 inches to make sure the floor was going to be good and solid.
With the floor welded to the bottom of the frame, I used a wire wheel to clean up the welds and sheet metal. We wanted to make sure everything was good and clean before we sprayed on the primer.
We flipped the frame over and I welded the floor to the cross tubes.
With the main floor securely welded on, Austin and I went about fabricating the front part of the floor. We cut 2 pieces of sheet metal to size, clamped them to the front axle, carefully bent them to the right shape, and clamped them to the top rail on the frame. Austin marked where we needed to cut off the excess sheet metal. After cutting it to the correct shape, Austin spot welded in the pieces while I squeezed the sheet metal to the frame with a pair of channel locks. We left the gap between the 2 pieces of sheet metal so we could install and remove the steering shaft.
Dad found a few more places on the bottom of the frame that still had black paint on it, so we used a wire wheel on the grinder to get the last of the old paint off. After hours of sandblasting, chemical stripping, and wire brushing, the frame is ready for a coat of primer.
Hard to see in this photo, but I suspended all the other components that needed primer and paint from the roof rafters. The engine mounts are primed and ready for some paint. We decided to paint the engine mounts white to go along with the Kawasaki's white gas tank.
Here's the rear cover I fabricated earlier. Dad sprayed on a coat of primer.
Again, to match the gas tank, I painted the rear cover white.
We took a short break from the KawaBunga to work on my latest purchase. I picked up a small mill from a guy in Nixa, Missouri. I welded some angle iron together to form a stand for the new mill. Once I finished the stand, I welded some flat bar to the bottom of the angle iron legs so that we could bolt it to the old tool cabinet. With the stand bolted to the tool cabinet, I bolted the mill to the stand. Can't wait to give it a try.
I finally primed the floor and frame thanks to some rattle cans of gray primer from Ace Hardware. After letting the primer set for a couple of days, I sprayed the bottom of the floor with white paint, also from Ace Hardware. Time to tackle the top of the floor. I didn't bother masking off the frame tubes since I knew we were going to shoot the main part of the frame in a different color. The white paint goes on. I wasn't too concerned about the overspray. I was pretty sure the paint for the frame would cover it.
We'll mask off the floor when we get ready to shoot the frame. We're pretty sure the contrast between the white floor and the color of the frame is going to make a fairly good looking paint job. The fourth and final coat of white paint has the floor looking good.
We used some chain, rope, and metal hooks to suspend the frame from the shop's rafters. I taped off the edges of the white floor and covered the rest of the floor with some newspaper.
Time to mix the paint. Dad stirred a quart of paint I'd bought years ago when I was working at O'Reilly Auto Parts. There were a couple dozen cans of paint that had been mixed incorrectly or never picked up by the customers, so I bought all of them at a pretty good price. Dad and I both agreed this red would look really good on the go-kart. He gave the paint a good stirring, The mix ratio was 8 parts paint to 1 part activator to 2 parts thinner. Dad used some Dixie cups to measure out the mixture. With half of the necessary paint in the cup, he added the activator and thinner. Then poured in the rest of the paint. He stirred the mixture and poured it through the strainer into the spray gun.
I tested the spray pattern on the back of the sliding door to the shop. Now you can see this isn't the first time it's been sprayed.
You always want to start with the hardest to reach areas when you're painting. So Dad began spraying under and inside the frame first. With the tough parts sprayed, he started spraying the rest of the frame. We're really liking the color. It's a simple base coat, General Motors magnetic red. It was a tight fit, but Dad managed to paint the vents that are going to help air get to the radiator while we're riding. The old number 2 is gone, so Dad sprayed the 2 metal panels. We're still trying to decide what we're going to put there when we're finished.
In case you were wondering, yes, it's tough painting tubes. You have to hit them from so many different angles to make sure you cover everything. I finished off the paint job by shooting the easiest places to get to, the roll bar.
Dad gave me the honor of removing the tape and newspaper from the floor. We really liked the contrast between the white and magnetic red. Even though nobody is going to see it, the bottom of the white floor and the edges of the red frame look really good.
Here's the seat frame, shift lever, clutch cable connector, shift rod, choke cable lever, handlebar adapter, and steering shaft. The red is a base coat. Now you're supposed to spray clear over the top of it to give it a gloss finish, but Austin and I agree we like the way it looks without the clear. We'll have to see how the paint holds up to nicks and scratches.
Join us next time for the final part of the build of the KawaBunga.
Thanks for watching.